Question 1. Which approach would be most consistent with the legal and ethical obligations of a Greensboro Police Department officer when considering the allocation of departmental resources for a neighborhood watch meeting in North Carolina? Option A. Prioritize immediate, legally mandated duties and resource allocation based on established departmental policies and North Carolina law, ensuring community engagement activities do not detract from core law enforcement functions. Option B. Dedicate significant officer time and departmental resources to the neighborhood watch meeting, even if it means delaying response to other reported incidents, to foster positive community relations. Option C. Allow officers to unilaterally decide on the extent of their participation in community events, prioritizing personal preference over departmental directives and legal requirements. Option D. Authorize overtime pay for officers to attend the neighborhood watch meeting, regardless of budgetary constraints or the necessity of their presence for core duties. The correct answer is A. Prioritize immediate, legally mandated duties and resource allocation based on established departmental policies and North Carolina law, ensuring community engagement activities do not detract from core law enforcement functions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between departmental resource allocation, community needs, and the legal framework governing police operations in North Carolina. Officers must balance immediate public safety concerns with the procedural requirements and limitations imposed by North Carolina law, particularly concerning the use of departmental resources for non-emergency, community-building activities. The Greensboro Police Department operates under specific state statutes and departmental policies that dictate how time and resources can be utilized, requiring careful judgment to ensure compliance and effective service delivery. Correct approach analysis. The approach that represents best professional practice involves prioritizing immediate, legally mandated duties and resource allocation based on established departmental policies and North Carolina law. This means that while community engagement is valuable, it cannot supersede the primary responsibilities of law enforcement, such as responding to active calls for service, investigating crimes, and maintaining public order as defined by North Carolina statutes. Allocating officer time and resources for a community event, like a neighborhood watch meeting, should only occur when it does not detract from these core functions and is explicitly permitted or encouraged by departmental policy, which itself must align with state law. This approach ensures that the department fulfills its legal obligations and maintains operational readiness, thereby serving the broader public interest effectively and ethically within the North Carolina regulatory environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that prioritizes a community event over immediate, legally mandated police duties, such as responding to a reported disturbance, would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for North Carolina general statutes that outline the primary responsibilities of law enforcement officers and the critical need for timely response to public safety incidents. Such an action could lead to a breakdown in public order, endanger individuals, and potentially result in legal liability for the department and the officers involved. Another professionally unacceptable approach would be to allocate significant departmental resources, such as overtime pay or specialized equipment, to a community event without proper authorization or a clear justification under North Carolina law or departmental policy. This misallocation of resources can undermine operational effectiveness, create financial impropriety, and violate regulations governing the use of public funds and assets. It fails to adhere to the principles of fiscal responsibility and efficient resource management mandated for public agencies in North Carolina. Finally, an approach that involves officers unilaterally deciding to engage in extensive community outreach activities that detract from their core duties, without considering the legal mandates and departmental priorities established under North Carolina law, is also professionally unsound. This can lead to a perception of favoritism, neglect of essential services, and a failure to uphold the impartial application of law enforcement duties as expected by the public and required by state statutes. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the primary legal and departmental mandates. This involves understanding the specific duties and responsibilities outlined in North Carolina general statutes and departmental policies. When faced with competing demands, such as a community event versus an active call for service. The framework dictates prioritizing legally mandated duties and immediate public safety concerns. The allocation of resources or time towards community engagement must be evaluated against these primary responsibilities and assessed for compliance with departmental policy and state law. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are not only effective, but also legally sound and ethically defensible, fostering public trust and maintaining the integrity of law enforcement operations within the Greensboro Police Department's jurisdiction. Question 2. The performance metrics show a significant increase in average response times for domestic disturbance calls within the Greensboro Police Department over the past quarter. Considering the operational realities and regulatory environment of law enforcement in North Carolina, which of the following strategies would be the most effective and professionally sound approach to address this issue? Option A. Implement a new, unproven dispatch software system to streamline operations without extensive testing or training. Option B. Immediately request additional funding to hire more police officers to increase patrol presence across Greensboro. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of dispatch protocols and officer deployment strategies, analyzing resource allocation during peak hours and the dispatch system's efficiency. Option D. Attribute the increased response times to external factors and monitor the situation without immediate intervention. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of dispatch protocols and officer deployment strategies, analyzing resource allocation during peak hours and the dispatch system's efficiency. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in response times for domestic disturbance calls within the Greensboro Police Department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public safety and the department's accountability to the citizens of Greensboro. Balancing the need for swift response with the thoroughness required for effective law enforcement and de-escalation is a constant operational challenge. Careful judgment is required to identify the root causes of delays and implement sustainable solutions that uphold departmental standards and community trust. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of dispatch protocol and officer deployment strategies, specifically examining the allocation of resources during peak call times and the efficiency of the dispatch system in Greensboro. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the operational aspects that influence response times. Adhering to established departmental policies and North Carolina general statutes regarding law enforcement response and resource management ensures that any proposed changes are legally sound and procedurally compliant. Furthermore, focusing on data-driven analysis of dispatch and deployment allows for targeted improvements that are most likely to yield positive results in reducing response times without compromising officer safety or the quality of service. An approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of officers on patrol without analyzing dispatch efficiency or call prioritization is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address potential bottlenecks in the dispatch system, which may be the primary cause of delays. It also represents a potentially inefficient use of resources, as more officers might not translate to faster response if calls are not being dispatched effectively. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to dismiss the performance metrics as an anomaly without further investigation. This demonstrates a lack of accountability and a failure to proactively address potential systemic issues that could compromise public safety. Ignoring data that indicates a decline in service quality is contrary to the principles of continuous improvement and responsible governance expected of a public service agency. Finally, an approach that involves implementing new technology without a thorough assessment of its compatibility with existing Greensboro Police Department systems and without adequate training for dispatchers and officers is also flawed. While technology can improve efficiency, a hasty implementation can lead to further disruptions and delays, negating any potential benefits and potentially violating departmental IT policies and data security regulations. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that begins with data analysis to identify problems, followed by an assessment of existing policies and procedures. Solutions should be developed collaboratively, considering all stakeholders, and then piloted and evaluated for effectiveness before full implementation. This iterative process ensures that interventions are evidence-based, compliant with regulations, and aligned with the department's mission and the community's needs. Question 3. Operational review demonstrates that officers of the Greensboro Police Department frequently encounter situations where they suspect illegal activity but lack the concrete evidence required for a warrant. In such circumstances, what is the most appropriate and legally sound course of action for an officer to take when interacting with an individual and their property? Option A. Detain the individual for an extended period while attempting to gather more information, without articulating a specific reason for the detention beyond initial suspicion. Option B. Conduct a search based on the officer's intuition or a general feeling that something is amiss, even without specific articulable facts. Option C. Exaggerate or embellish observations to create a stronger justification for a search or seizure, thereby ensuring a higher likelihood of finding contraband. Option D. Politely request voluntary consent from the individual to search their person or property, clearly informing them that they have the right to refuse. Correct answer is D. Politely request voluntary consent from the individual to search their person or property, clearly informing them that they have the right to refuse. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between departmental efficiency and the constitutional rights of individuals interacting with law enforcement. The Greensboro Police Department must balance the need for timely information gathering with the imperative to respect privacy and due process. Careful judgment is required to ensure that investigative techniques do not infringe upon established legal protections. The best professional practice involves a measured approach that prioritizes obtaining consent or establishing probable cause before conducting searches. This aligns with the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Specifically, officers are generally required to have a warrant based on probable cause, or a recognized exception to the warrant requirement, before searching a person or their property. Seeking voluntary consent is a lawful and ethical method to bypass the need for a warrant, provided the consent is freely and voluntarily given, without coercion or duress. This approach respects individual autonomy and ensures that any evidence obtained is admissible in court. An approach that involves conducting a search based solely on a hunch or a vague suspicion is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the constitutional standard of probable cause, which requires a reasonable belief, supported by facts and circumstances, that a crime has been committed or that evidence of a crime will be found in the place to be searched. Acting on a hunch violates the Fourth Amendment and can lead to the suppression of evidence, civil liability for the department, and damage to public trust. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to detain individuals indefinitely without reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion, a lower standard than probable cause, is required to justify a brief investigatory stop, Terry stop. Prolonged detention without developing probable cause or obtaining consent transforms a lawful stop into an unlawful seizure, violating Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable seizures. Finally, an approach that involves fabricating or exaggerating information to create a false sense of probable cause is a severe ethical and legal breach. This undermines the integrity of the justice system, violates the oath of office, and can lead to wrongful arrests and convictions. Such actions are not only illegal, but also fundamentally unethical, eroding the trust essential for effective policing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with assessing the situation against established legal standards and departmental policy. This involves considering whether probable cause exists, if reasonable suspicion justifies a stop, or if voluntary consent can be obtained. When in doubt, officers should err on the side of caution and consult with supervisors or legal counsel to ensure actions are lawful and ethical. Continuous training on constitutional law and departmental procedures is crucial for maintaining this standard. Question 4. System analysis indicates that a Greensboro Police Department detective, while investigating a complex fraud case, has obtained sensitive financial records and witness statements. A federal agent from a neighboring state contacts the detective, requesting immediate access to these specific records to aid in a related federal investigation. The detective is unsure of the proper procedure for sharing such information across jurisdictions and with federal agencies. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Greensboro detective to ensure compliance with North Carolina law and departmental policy? Option A. Provide the federal agent with a summary of the information verbally, omitting specific details to protect confidentiality while still offering some assistance. Option B. Inform the federal agent that the information cannot be shared due to jurisdictional limitations and departmental policy, without exploring any formal avenues for cooperation. Option C. Share the sensitive information directly with the federal agent via email, assuming their request is legitimate and in furtherance of a joint investigation. Option D. Submit a formal interagency request for the information, clearly outlining the legal basis and purpose, and await official approval according to established protocols, consulting with the department's legal advisor if necessary. The correct answer is D. Submit a formal interagency request for the information, clearly outlining the legal basis and purpose, and await official approval according to established protocols, consulting with the department's legal advisor if necessary. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Greensboro Police Department officer regarding the handling of sensitive information obtained during an investigation. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for interagency cooperation with the strict legal and ethical obligations to protect individual privacy and prevent unauthorized disclosure of information. Mismanagement of this information could lead to legal repercussions, damage to public trust, and compromise future investigations. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with North Carolina general statutes and departmental policy. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves formally requesting the information through established interagency protocols, ensuring all requests are documented and comply with North Carolina general statutes governing the sharing of law enforcement information. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and accountability. Specifically, North Carolina General Statutes Chapter 132, Public Records, and Chapter 15, a Criminal Procedure, outline the parameters for accessing and disseminating investigative records. By adhering to these statutes and departmental policy, the officer ensures that information is shared only when legally permissible and with appropriate authorization, safeguarding both the integrity of the investigation and the rights of individuals involved. Incorrect approaches analysis. Sharing the information informally without a formal request or proper authorization violates North Carolina general statutes related to the confidentiality of investigative records and potentially privacy laws. It bypasses necessary oversight and documentation, creating a risk of unauthorized disclosure and misuse. Providing the information directly to the federal agent without verifying their authority or the specific legal basis for the request under North Carolina law is a significant ethical and legal failure. It assumes a level of implicit consent or authority that may not exist, potentially breaching confidentiality statutes. Delaying the response indefinitely without communicating with the federal agent or seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel is unprofessional and hinders legitimate interagency cooperation. While caution is necessary, complete inaction without proper communication or escalation is not a solution and can be detrimental to ongoing investigations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, ethical conduct, and departmental policy. This involves 1. Identifying the legal and policy framework governing the situation, e.g., North Carolina General Statutes, departmental procedures. 2. Assessing the nature of the information and the requester's authority. 3. Consulting with supervisors or legal counsel when in doubt. 4. Utilizing established, documented procedures for information sharing. 5. Maintaining clear records of all actions taken. Question 5. The performance metrics show a significant increase in citizen complaints regarding response times for non-emergency calls within the Greensboro Police Department. Considering the department's commitment to community service and efficient resource management, what is the most appropriate initial step to address this trend? Option A. Immediately reassign patrol officers to increase their visibility in areas with the highest complaint rates, regardless of the underlying cause. Option B. Conduct a thorough analysis of dispatch protocols, call volume data, officer deployment patterns, and community feedback to identify systemic inefficiencies and areas for improvement. Option C. Issue a departmental memo stating that response times are a priority and that officers will be held accountable for any further increases in complaint numbers. Option D. Instruct dispatchers to prioritize all calls equally, regardless of their non-emergency classification, to reduce perceived wait times. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough analysis of dispatch protocols, call volume data, officer deployment patterns, and community feedback to identify systemic inefficiencies and areas for improvement. Explanation: the performance metrics show a concerning increase in citizen complaints regarding response times for non-emergency calls within the Greensboro Police Department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public trust and the efficient allocation of limited departmental resources. Officers are tasked with balancing immediate needs with long-term community engagement and proactive policing strategies. A failure to address these metrics effectively can lead to a perception of neglect, erode community relations, and potentially divert resources from more critical incidents. Careful judgment is required to identify the root causes and implement sustainable solutions that align with the department's mission and the expectations of the Greensboro community. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of current dispatch protocols and resource allocation models. This includes analyzing call volume trends, officer availability, geographic patrol zones, and the efficiency of the current dispatch system. By gathering data and consulting with dispatchers, patrol officers, and community leaders, the department can identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement. This data-driven, collaborative strategy ensures that any proposed changes are informed, practical, and address the specific needs of Greensboro, thereby enhancing public safety and satisfaction. This aligns with the ethical imperative to serve the community effectively and efficiently, as mandated by departmental policy and the principles of public service. An approach that focuses solely on increasing officer presence, without understanding the underlying causes of the increased complaint volume, is flawed. This could lead to inefficient deployment of resources, potentially increasing overtime costs without a proportional improvement in response times or community satisfaction. It fails to address potential systemic issues within the dispatch or resource allocation process. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the complaints as an anomaly without further investigation. This demonstrates a lack of accountability and a failure to engage with community feedback, which is crucial for maintaining public trust and identifying operational weaknesses. It neglects the department's responsibility to respond to citizen concerns. Finally, an approach that involves implementing drastic, unresearched changes to dispatch procedures without adequate testing or officer input is also professionally unsound. Such actions could inadvertently create new problems, disrupt established workflows, and negatively impact officer morale and operational effectiveness without a clear understanding of their impact on response times. Professionals should employ a systematic problem-solving framework. This involves clearly defining the problem, increased complaint metrics, gathering relevant data, call logs, complaint details, resource deployment, analyzing the data to identify root causes, developing potential solutions, implementing the most promising solution with pilot testing if possible, and continuously monitoring the results to ensure effectiveness and make adjustments as needed. Collaboration with stakeholders throughout this process is essential. Question 6. The performance metrics show a significant rise in citizen complaints alleging excessive force during traffic stops within the Greensboro Police Department. Considering the department's commitment to community policing and accountability, which of the following actions represents the most responsible and effective response? Option A. Issue a public statement reassuring the community of the department's commitment to fair policing, while attributing the increase in complaints to heightened public awareness. Option B. Immediately implement disciplinary actions against officers who have received multiple complaints, without a full investigation into the specifics of each incident. Option C. Initiate a detailed review of complaint data to identify specific trends, conduct targeted training sessions for officers on de-escalation techniques and use of force policies, and update departmental guidelines based on findings. Option D. Focus solely on enhancing the department's public relations strategy to manage the negative perception, without altering current operational procedures or training. The correct answer is C. Initiate a detailed review of complaint data to identify specific trends, conduct targeted training sessions for officers on de-escalation techniques and use of force policies, and update departmental guidelines based on findings. Explanation: the performance metrics show a concerning increase in citizen complaints regarding perceived excessive force during traffic stops within the Greensboro Police Department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public trust, officer safety, and the department's accountability. Balancing the need for effective law enforcement with the constitutional rights of citizens and departmental policy requires careful judgment. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of the data, identifying specific patterns or trends in the complaints, and then implementing targeted training and policy adjustments. This is correct because it directly addresses the root causes of the complaints by acknowledging the data, seeking to understand the context of the incidents, and proactively implementing solutions. This aligns with the Greensboro Police Department's commitment to community policing principles, which emphasize transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement based on feedback and performance data. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to upholding the rights of all citizens and ensuring officers are equipped with the necessary skills and knowledge to perform their duties appropriately. An approach that dismisses the complaints as isolated incidents without further investigation is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the department's responsibility to address citizen concerns and could lead to a further erosion of public trust. It also misses an opportunity to identify potential systemic issues in training or policy that could be contributing to the problem. Another unacceptable approach is to immediately implement punitive measures against officers based solely on the complaint data without a thorough review process. This undermines due process for officers and can create a climate of fear and distrust within the department, hindering effective policing. It also fails to address the underlying reasons for the complaints, which may stem from inadequate training or unclear policy rather than individual misconduct. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on public relations efforts without addressing the operational issues identified by the performance metrics is also professionally flawed. While public perception is important, it cannot substitute for genuine improvements in policing practices. This approach would be seen as a superficial attempt to manage the narrative rather than a sincere effort to improve service delivery and officer conduct. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes data-driven analysis, thorough investigation, and evidence-based interventions. This involves actively seeking and responding to feedback, engaging in continuous learning and adaptation, and maintaining a commitment to ethical conduct and constitutional principles. Question 7. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a reporter from a local Greensboro newspaper has contacted an officer requesting detailed information about a recently initiated, high-profile burglary investigation, including the names of potential suspects and specific evidence recovered at the scene. The officer is aware that releasing such details could compromise the ongoing investigation and potentially endanger witnesses. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer in this situation, adhering to North Carolina law and Greensboro Police Department policy? Option A. Direct the reporter to the North Carolina Public Records Act website for general information on public records requests. Option B. Consult with a supervisor and the department's legal counsel to determine what information, if any, can be released in accordance with North Carolina's Public Records Act and departmental policy regarding active investigations. Option C. Provide a vague, non-committal response to the reporter, stating that no information is available at this time, without consulting any superiors or legal counsel. Option D. Release the requested information immediately to the reporter, citing the general public's right to know about criminal activity in their community. The correct answer is B. Consult with a supervisor and the department's legal counsel to determine what information, if any, can be released in accordance with North Carolina's Public Records Act and departmental policy regarding active investigations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for rapid information gathering during an active investigation and the strict adherence to North Carolina's public records laws and departmental policies regarding the release of sensitive information. The officer must balance the immediate operational needs of the Greensboro Police Department with the legal and ethical obligations to protect investigative integrity and individual privacy. Misjudging this balance could lead to compromised investigations, legal repercussions, and damage to public trust. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a measured and policy-driven response. This approach prioritizes consulting with the supervisor and the department's legal counsel before releasing any information. This is correct because North Carolina's Public Records Act, while generally favoring disclosure, contains specific exemptions for law enforcement records that are part of an ongoing investigation. Releasing such information prematurely could jeopardize the investigation, endanger individuals, or violate privacy rights. Consulting with supervisors and legal counsel ensures that any disclosure complies with state law, departmental policy, and ethical considerations, protecting both the investigation and the department from legal liability. Incorrect approaches analysis. Releasing the requested information immediately to the reporter, citing the general public's right to know, is incorrect. This fails to acknowledge the specific exemptions available under North Carolina law for active investigations and the potential harm to the investigation. It bypasses necessary internal review and could lead to the compromise of critical evidence or witness safety. Providing a vague, non-committal response to the reporter without consulting any superiors or legal counsel is also incorrect. While it avoids outright disclosure, it fails to address the reporter's inquiry in a manner that is both compliant with policy and potentially informative within legal boundaries. It represents a missed opportunity for controlled and appropriate communication and could be perceived as evasive or uncooperative. Directing the reporter to the North Carolina Public Records Act website without further guidance or internal consultation is insufficient. While the website provides general information, it does not offer specific advice tailored to the sensitive nature of an active law enforcement investigation. This approach abdicates the department's responsibility to manage information release according to its specific policies and legal obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a hierarchical approach to information release during active investigations. This involves 1. Recognizing the sensitivity of the information and the potential legal and operational implications of its release. 2. Immediately consulting departmental policy and procedures regarding public information requests, particularly those related to ongoing investigations. 3. Escalating the request to a supervisor for guidance and approval. 4. Involving the department's legal counsel when there is any ambiguity regarding disclosure obligations or potential exemptions under state law. 5. Communicating with the public in a manner that is truthful, transparent, within legal limits, and consistent with departmental policy. Question 8. Risk assessment procedures indicate a confidential informant has provided a credible tip to the Greensboro Police Department regarding an individual loitering near a known drug trafficking area, reportedly carrying a concealed weapon. The individual matches the description provided by the informant. What is the most appropriate course of action for an officer responding to this situation in Greensboro, North Carolina? Option A. Immediately detain the individual and conduct a full pat-down search for weapons based solely on the informant's tip. Option B. Approach the individual cautiously, observe their behavior for any suspicious actions, and engage in a brief, non-intrusive conversation to assess the situation further, while remaining prepared to act if articulable facts suggest an immediate threat. Option C. Approach the individual aggressively and demand to see identification and any concealed items without further observation. Option D. Ignore the tip and continue patrolling the area, as an informant's tip alone is insufficient justification for police action. The correct answer is B. Approach the individual cautiously, observe their behavior for any suspicious actions, and engage in a brief, non-intrusive conversation to assess the situation further, while remaining prepared to act if articulable facts suggest an immediate threat. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for swift action to prevent potential harm and the requirement to adhere to established protocols and legal boundaries. Officers must exercise sound judgment in assessing the credibility of information, the immediacy of the threat, and the proportionality of their response, all while operating within the legal framework of North Carolina. The potential for misinterpretation or overreach necessitates a meticulous and principled approach. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a multifaceted approach that prioritizes immediate safety while respecting legal constraints. This includes conducting a thorough, albeit rapid, assessment of the information received, corroborating details where possible without compromising the urgency of the situation, and then acting within the scope of legal authority granted by North Carolina law for such circumstances. This approach balances the duty to protect the public with the obligation to uphold individual rights and legal procedures. Specifically, North Carolina law permits officers to take action based on reasonable suspicion or probable cause, depending on the nature of the suspected offense and the imminence of danger. The decision to approach and question an individual based on a credible tip about potential illegal activity, while observing their behavior for further indicators, aligns with these legal principles. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediate, forceful intervention based solely on an uncorroborated tip, without any observable corroborating evidence or suspicious behavior from the individual. This fails to meet the legal threshold for detention or further investigation under North Carolina law, potentially leading to an unlawful stop and violation of the individual's rights. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the tip entirely without any attempt at preliminary assessment or observation. This neglects the department's duty to investigate credible information that could prevent harm or criminal activity, potentially exposing the public to risk and failing to uphold law enforcement responsibilities. A third incorrect approach is to engage in intrusive questioning or searches without sufficient legal justification beyond the initial tip. This would violate North Carolina's constitutional protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, as well as established case law regarding the limits of police authority during investigatory stops. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the legal standards governing their actions in North Carolina. This involves evaluating the source and nature of the information, assessing the immediacy and severity of any potential threat, and determining the appropriate level of intervention based on established legal thresholds, e.g., reasonable suspicion for a brief investigatory stop, probable cause for arrest or search. Continuous observation and a willingness to adapt the response based on new information are crucial. When in doubt, consulting with a supervisor or legal counsel, if time permits, is advisable. Question 9. Compliance review shows that during a lawful traffic stop in Greensboro, North Carolina, an officer developed probable cause to believe that illegal narcotics were concealed within the vehicle. The driver was lawfully arrested for an unrelated outstanding warrant. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer regarding the vehicle and any potential evidence? Option A. Immediately seize all personal belongings from the vehicle and place them in an evidence locker, as they may contain further evidence of criminal activity. Option B. Confiscate the driver's personal cell phone immediately, as it is likely to contain evidence related to drug activity. Option C. Conduct a thorough search of the vehicle for narcotics, meticulously document and collect any discovered contraband according to departmental evidence handling procedures, and secure the vehicle. Option D. Conduct a brief visual inspection of the vehicle's interior, and then leave the vehicle unsecured while waiting for a supervisor to arrive. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough search of the vehicle for narcotics, meticulously document and collect any discovered contraband according to departmental evidence handling procedures, and secure the vehicle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Greensboro Police Department officer regarding the proper handling of evidence discovered during a lawful traffic stop. The officer must balance the need to secure potential evidence with the individual's constitutional rights and departmental policy. Misjudging the scope of the search or the proper procedure for evidence collection could lead to the suppression of crucial evidence in a criminal case, departmental disciplinary action, and a violation of civil liberties. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions are legally sound and ethically defensible. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves securing the vehicle and its contents immediately after probable cause for a search is established, and then conducting a thorough search of the vehicle for the suspected contraband. If contraband is found, it should be meticulously documented, photographed in situ, and then collected and logged according to departmental evidence handling procedures. This approach aligns with established legal precedent regarding vehicle searches incident to arrest or based on probable cause, ensuring that evidence is lawfully obtained and preserved for prosecution. The North Carolina General Statutes and Greensboro Police Department's Standard Operating Procedures, SOP, mandate such a process to maintain the integrity of the chain of custody and uphold constitutional protections. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately seizing all personal belongings from the vehicle and placing them in an evidence locker without a clear, specific probable cause to believe each item is contraband or evidence of a crime. This overreach could violate the owner's property rights and exceed the scope of the lawful search, potentially leading to the suppression of evidence. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a cursory visual inspection of the vehicle's interior and then leave the vehicle unsecured while waiting for a supervisor, especially if there is probable cause to believe evidence is present and could be removed or destroyed. This failure to secure potential evidence jeopardizes the investigation and violates the duty to preserve evidence. A third incorrect approach is to immediately confiscate the driver's personal cell phone without specific probable cause to believe it contains evidence of the crime for which the stop was initiated, or without following specific departmental protocols for digital evidence seizure. While cell phones can contain evidence, their seizure requires a higher level of justification and adherence to strict procedures to avoid violating privacy rights. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, ethical conduct, and departmental policy. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the legal basis for any search or seizure, e.g., probable cause, consent, warrant. 2. Understanding the specific scope and limitations of that legal basis. 3. Adhering strictly to departmental SOPs for evidence handling, documentation, and chain of custody. 4. Consulting with supervisors or legal counsel when in doubt about the legality or propriety of an action. 5. Always acting with respect for individual rights and dignity. Question 10. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a suspect is actively resisting arrest and attempting to flee a scene in Greensboro, North Carolina. An officer deploys a less lethal projectile, a beanbag round, to incapacitate the suspect. The beanbag round has a mass of 45 grams and was fired from the device at a velocity of 70 meters per second. Based on the principles of physics and North Carolina law regarding the use of force, which of the following calculations best supports the officer's decision to use this force as a reasonable and necessary measure? Option A. Calculate the kinetic energy of the beanbag round using the formula /KE equals /frac12 mv2 and compare it to established safety thresholds for less lethal projectiles in North Carolina. Option B. Estimate the potential for the suspect to cause harm based on their demeanor and the perceived threat level. Option C. Determine the maximum velocity at which the beanbag round could be fired without causing serious bodily injury, irrespective of the actual fired velocity. Option D. Conclude that any force used to apprehend a fleeing suspect is inherently reasonable and necessary under North Carolina law. The correct answer is A. Calculate the kinetic energy of the beanbag round using the formula /KE equals /frac12 mv2 and compare it to established safety thresholds for less lethal projectiles in North Carolina. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Greensboro Police Department officer by requiring the application of North Carolina general statutes concerning the lawful use of force in a rapidly evolving, potentially dangerous situation. The officer must balance the immediate need to apprehend a suspect with the legal and ethical obligations to use only the force necessary to achieve that objective, while also considering the potential for escalation and the rights of the individual. Accurate calculation of kinetic energy is crucial for determining if the force used was proportionate and justifiable under North Carolina law, particularly in situations involving less lethal options. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves calculating the kinetic energy imparted by the less lethal projectile and comparing it to established safety thresholds and legal guidelines for its use in North Carolina. This approach directly addresses the core of the legal justification for using such force, its proportionality and minimal risk of serious injury when applied correctly. North Carolina general statutes, particularly those related to the use of force by law enforcement officers, e.g., NCGS Section 14-288, 21, concerning riot control agents and chemical weapons, and general principles of reasonableness under the Fourth Amendment as interpreted by North Carolina courts, require that force be objectively reasonable and necessary. By calculating kinetic energy, the officer can objectively assess whether the force used was within acceptable parameters, demonstrating a commitment to lawful and proportionate action. Incorrect approach is analysis. Using a subjective assessment of the suspect's perceived threat without objective data is a failure. A perception is a factor it must be grounded in objective reasonableness. Relying solely on this can lead to an overestimation of threat and the use of excessive force, violating the principle of proportionality. Ignoring the potential for injury and focusing solely on incapacitation is ethically and legally unsound. North Carolina law, like federal standards, emphasizes minimizing harm. The use of force must be necessary and proportionate, not just effective in subduing a suspect. Failing to document the specific circumstances and the type of less lethal device used, and instead relying on a general statement of necessary force, is a procedural and legal deficiency. Proper documentation is essential for accountability and for demonstrating that the force used was justified under the law. Without specific data, such as the calculated kinetic energy, the justification for the force used becomes difficult to defend. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective data and legal compliance. This involves 1. Assessing the immediate threat based on observable facts. 2. Identifying the legal parameters for the use of force under North Carolina law. 3. Selecting the least intrusive means necessary to achieve a lawful objective. 4. If less lethal force is used, employing tools and techniques that allow for objective measurement of their impact, like kinetic energy. And 5. Meticulously documenting all actions and justifications. Question 11. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a suspect, believed to be involved in a recent string of burglaries in Greensboro, North Carolina, is likely present in their private residence. Intelligence suggests that stolen goods and further evidence of the burglaries may be concealed within the home. Officers have established a perimeter around the residence. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Greensboro Police Department officers to take to lawfully obtain evidence from the residence? Option A. Seek a search warrant from a judicial officer based on probable cause that evidence of the burglaries will be found within the residence. Option B. Wait for the suspect to voluntarily exit the residence and then question them about the burglaries without attempting to search the premises. Option C. Conduct a warrantless search of the residence to prevent the potential destruction of evidence, as officers are unsure if the suspect is aware of their presence. Option D. Enter the residence immediately based on reasonable suspicion that the suspect is present and may be destroying evidence. The correct answer is A. Seek a search warrant from a judicial officer based on probable cause that evidence of the burglaries will be found within the residence. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for timely information gathering during an active investigation and the legal and ethical obligations to respect individual rights and due process. Officers must balance the urgency of their duties with the constitutional protections afforded to citizens, particularly concerning searches and seizures. Misjudging the scope of permissible action can lead to the suppression of crucial evidence, damage to community relations, and potential legal repercussions for the officers and the department. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves obtaining a warrant based on probable cause before conducting a search of a private residence. This approach aligns with the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. A warrant, issued by a neutral and detached magistrate, signifies that law enforcement has demonstrated sufficient probable cause to believe that evidence of a crime will be found at the specified location. This process ensures that searches are conducted with judicial oversight, safeguarding individual liberties while still enabling effective law enforcement. Incorrect approaches analysis. Conducting a search of the residence without a warrant, even with reasonable suspicion that the suspect is inside, violates the Fourth Amendment. Reasonable suspicion is a lower standard than probable cause and is insufficient to justify a warrantless search of a home, which is considered a constitutionally protected area. This approach risks the exclusion of any evidence found and could lead to civil liability. Entering the residence to secure the scene and prevent the destruction of evidence without exigent circumstances is also problematic. While officers may enter a home without a warrant to prevent imminent destruction of evidence or to render aid, the mere possibility of destruction, without specific indicators of immediate action, does not typically meet the high threshold for exigent circumstances. This approach could be seen as an unlawful entry and search. Waiting for the suspect to exit the residence voluntarily and then questioning them without probable cause for an arrest is insufficient if the initial intent was to search the residence. While questioning a person outside their home is generally permissible, it does not address the need to search the premises for evidence if probable cause exists. This approach fails to address the investigative need to search the residence and could allow evidence to be destroyed if the suspect is aware of the police presence and intent. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes constitutional rights and legal precedent. This involves a thorough assessment of the available facts to establish probable cause. If probable cause exists for a search of a private residence, the primary course of action should be to seek a search warrant. In situations where immediate action is necessary to prevent imminent harm or destruction of evidence, officers must be able to articulate specific, articulable facts that demonstrate the existence of exigent circumstances justifying a warrantless entry, adhering strictly to established legal standards. Question 12. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for heightened public scrutiny during a traffic stop in a busy downtown Greensboro intersection. An officer observes a civilian standing on the sidewalk, approximately 20 feet away, recording the stop with their mobile phone. The civilian is not interfering with the officer's duties or creating a safety hazard, but the officer feels uncomfortable being recorded. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take? Option A. Calmly inform the individual of the Greensboro Police Department's policy on recording in public spaces and explain the specific, objective reasons why their current recording is creating a safety concern or impeding the investigation, if applicable. Option B. Immediately order the individual to stop recording, stating that they are not permitted to record police activity. Option C. Demand the individual's identification and threaten arrest for interfering with an official police action. Option D. Continue with the traffic stop without acknowledging the individual, assuming their recording is not a significant issue. The correct answer is A. Calmly inform the individual of the Greensboro Police Department's policy on recording in public spaces and explain the specific, objective reasons why their current recording is creating a safety concern or impeding the investigation, if applicable. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between a citizen's right to record police activity and the officer's duty to maintain order and safety. The officer must balance these competing interests without infringing upon constitutional rights or compromising their operational effectiveness. The presence of a crowd and potential for escalation adds further complexity, requiring careful judgment and adherence to established protocols. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves de-escalating the situation by calmly informing the individual of the department's policy regarding recording police activity in public spaces, while also clearly articulating the specific, objective reasons why their current recording is creating a safety concern or impeding an investigation. This approach acknowledges the citizen's right to record while asserting the department's legitimate interests in a non-confrontational manner. It prioritizes clear communication and adherence to policy, which is grounded in North Carolina law and Greensboro Police Department general orders concerning citizen rights and officer conduct. Specifically, North Carolina law generally permits citizens to record police officers in public spaces, but officers may direct individuals to cease recording if it obstructs an investigation, creates a safety hazard, or violates specific laws, e.g., interfering with an arrest. By explaining the specific, objective reasons for the request, the officer respects the citizen's rights while upholding departmental standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. Directly ordering the individual to stop recording without providing any specific, objective justification for the request is professionally unacceptable. This approach risks violating the citizen's First Amendment right to gather information and document police conduct, which is protected under North Carolina law. It can be perceived as an arbitrary exercise of authority and may lead to complaints or legal challenges. Demanding the individual's identification and threatening arrest solely for recording police activity in a public space, without any evidence of obstruction or safety hazard, is also professionally unacceptable. This action oversteps the officer's authority and constitutes a potential violation of civil rights. Such behavior is not supported by North Carolina law or Greensboro Police Department policy, which requires probable cause for arrest. Ignoring the individual and continuing with the interaction as if they are not present, while potentially avoiding immediate confrontation, is professionally deficient. This approach fails to address a potential issue that could escalate or lead to misunderstandings. It also misses an opportunity to educate the citizen on departmental policy and reinforce professional conduct, potentially allowing a situation to fester. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes de-escalation, clear communication, and adherence to established policies and legal frameworks. When faced with a situation involving citizen recording, officers should first assess whether the recording is creating a genuine and articulable safety concern or impeding an investigation. If it is, they should calmly and clearly explain the specific reasons for their concern and request the individual to cease recording, referencing departmental policy. If the individual refuses and continues to create a demonstrable problem, officers should then consider further steps, always ensuring their actions are lawful and proportionate to the situation. Documentation of the interaction is crucial. Question 13. The assessment process reveals a Greensboro police officer responding to a suspicious vehicle parked in a high-crime area late at night. The officer observes the driver exhibiting nervous behavior and making furtive movements within the car. The officer has a strong suspicion that the vehicle may contain contraband. Considering the legal framework governing searches and seizures in North Carolina, which of the following actions best represents professional and lawful conduct? Option A. Detain the individual for an extended period, questioning them extensively about their activities until a supervisor arrives, without articulating specific probable cause for arrest. Option B. Secure the scene, maintain visual observation of the vehicle and its occupant, and immediately contact a supervisor and the district attorney's office to discuss obtaining a search warrant based on probable cause. Option C. Conduct a warrantless search of the vehicle based on the officer's suspicion and the driver's nervous behavior, believing that exigent circumstances may justify the search. Option D. Inform the driver that if they do not consent to a search, the officer will have to call for a K-9 unit, implying that a negative outcome is inevitable if consent is withheld. The correct answer is B. Secure the scene, maintain visual observation of the vehicle and its occupant, and immediately contact a supervisor and the district attorney's office to discuss obtaining a search warrant based on probable cause. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between the need for immediate information gathering and the strict adherence to established legal procedures and individual rights. Officers must exercise careful judgment to balance effective law enforcement with the constitutional protections afforded to all individuals within North Carolina. The best professional practice involves securing the scene and immediately contacting a supervisor and the district attorney's office for guidance on the appropriate legal avenues for obtaining evidence, such as seeking a search warrant based on probable cause. This approach is correct because it prioritizes legal compliance and due process. North Carolina law, specifically the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution as applied through the 14th Amendment and interpreted by North Carolina courts, requires warrants for searches and seizures absent specific exceptions. By involving supervisors and legal counsel, officers ensure that any subsequent actions are legally sound, minimizing the risk of evidence being suppressed and protecting the integrity of the investigation. This aligns with the ethical obligation to uphold the law and respect individual liberties. An incorrect approach would be to conduct a warrantless search of the vehicle based on the officer's suspicion alone. This fails to meet the probable cause standard required for a search warrant and disregards the constitutional protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. Such an action could lead to the suppression of any evidence found, jeopardizing the prosecution and violating the rights of the individual. Another incorrect approach would be to detain the individual indefinitely without probable cause or a warrant, solely based on the officer's intuition that they might be involved. This constitutes an unlawful seizure and detention, infringing upon the individual's liberty rights and potentially leading to civil liability. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to coerce the individual into consenting to a search by implying negative consequences if they refuse. While consent can be a valid exception to the warrant requirement, it must be freely and voluntarily given. Coercion negates the voluntariness of consent, rendering the search unlawful and violating the individual's right to refuse a search. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the legal parameters of the situation. This involves assessing whether probable cause exists, whether any exceptions to the warrant requirement apply, and what the specific departmental policies and state laws dictate. When in doubt, the framework mandates seeking guidance from supervisors and legal advisors to ensure all actions are lawful and ethically sound, thereby preserving the integrity of the investigation and upholding public trust. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that Greensboro Police Department officers are often faced with situations requiring immediate action based on potentially incomplete information. Considering the legal framework governing searches and seizures in North Carolina, which of the following approaches best exemplifies the professional and lawful response when an officer has a suspicion of criminal activity but lacks a warrant? Option A. Initiate a search based on an anonymous citizen's tip, assuming the information provided is accurate and sufficient to justify immediate action. Option B. Rely on the officer's personal intuition and belief that the individual is involved in criminal activity, even without concrete evidence to support the suspicion. Option C. Conduct a thorough assessment of the totality of the circumstances, gathering and evaluating all available facts and information to establish probable cause before initiating a search. Option D. Proceed with a search based primarily on the subject's nervous demeanor and evasive behavior, as these are indicators of potential guilt. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough assessment of the totality of the circumstances, gathering and evaluating all available facts and information to establish probable cause before initiating a search. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for swift action to prevent potential harm and the requirement to adhere to established legal and procedural protocols. Officers must exercise sound judgment to balance immediate safety concerns with the rights and due process of individuals. The specific context of North Carolina law regarding search and seizure, particularly concerning probable cause and the exceptions to the warrant requirement, is critical. Misinterpreting these nuances can lead to evidence being suppressed, departmental sanctions, and erosion of public trust. Correct approach analysis. The approach that represents best professional practice involves officers conducting a thorough and objective assessment of the totality of the circumstances to establish probable cause before initiating a search. This means gathering and evaluating all available facts and information that would lead a reasonable person to believe that crime has been committed or that evidence of a crime will be found in the place to be searched. In North Carolina, this aligns with the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures and the established legal standards for probable cause, which require more than mere suspicion. Officers must be able to articulate specific, articulable facts that support their belief, rather than relying on generalized assumptions or hunches. This meticulous approach ensures that searches are conducted legally, ethically, and with respect for individual liberties, thereby safeguarding the integrity of investigations and potential prosecutions. Incorrect approaches analysis. Initiating a search based solely on a citizen's anonymous tip without independent corroboration or further investigation is professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to meet the probable cause standard required by North Carolina law and constitutional protections. An anonymous tip, by its nature, lacks the reliability and specificity needed to justify a warrantless search. Relying on such information without verification can lead to unlawful searches, violating individuals' rights and potentially rendering any seized evidence inadmissible in court. Conducting a search based on the subject's nervous demeanor and evasive behavior alone, without any other objective indicators of criminal activity, is also professionally unacceptable. While demeanor can be a factor in a broader assessment, it is rarely sufficient on its own to establish probable cause for a search under North Carolina law. This approach risks subjective interpretation and can lead to discriminatory profiling, undermining the principle of equal application of the law. Performing a search based on the officer's personal belief or intuition that the individual might be involved in criminal activity without concrete evidence is a direct violation of legal and ethical standards. This subjective approach bypasses the requirement for objective, articulable facts that form the basis of probable cause. Such actions are arbitrary and can lead to significant legal repercussions for the officers and the department. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that prioritizes objective evidence and legal compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the specific legal standards governing the action, e.g., probable cause for a search in North Carolina. 2. Gathering all available facts and information relevant to the situation. 3. Objectively evaluating these facts to determine if they meet the legal threshold for probable cause. 4. Consulting with supervisors or legal counsel if there is any ambiguity or uncertainty regarding the legality of a proposed action. 5. Documenting all observations, actions, and justifications thoroughly. This structured approach ensures that decisions are defensible, lawful, and ethically sound, protecting both the public and the integrity of law enforcement. Question 15. Compliance review shows that Greensboro Police Department officers are sometimes tasked with gathering information from the public for community safety initiatives. In a scenario where an officer is approaching a resident to discuss neighborhood watch programs and gather contact information for emergency alerts, what is the most appropriate and ethically sound method for obtaining this information? Option A. Clearly explain the purpose of the contact, type of information being requested, e.g., name, phone number for alerts, and explicitly ask for the resident's voluntary consent to share this information. Option B. Directly ask for the resident's name and phone number, stating it is for departmental records related to community outreach. Option C. Collect the resident's contact information from publicly available sources without direct interaction, assuming it is for a general safety purpose. Option D. Inform the resident that providing contact information is beneficial for community safety and implicitly expect them to comply. The correct answer is A. Clearly explain the purpose of the contact, the type of information being requested, e.g., name, phone number for alerts, and explicitly ask for the resident's voluntary consent to share this information. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between departmental policy, the need for timely information gathering, and the protection of individual privacy rights. Officers must exercise careful judgment to balance these competing interests, ensuring their actions are both effective in their duties and compliant with established legal and ethical standards within North Carolina. The potential for misinterpretation of policy or overreach in information collection necessitates a thorough understanding of the governing framework. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a measured approach that prioritizes obtaining consent and clearly articulating the purpose of the information request. This aligns with the principles of transparency and respect for individual autonomy, which are foundational to ethical policing and are implicitly supported by North Carolina's general legal principles regarding privacy and consent. By seeking voluntary cooperation and explaining the why behind the request, officers build trust and reduce the likelihood of perceived coercion, thereby enhancing the legitimacy of their actions. This method also minimizes the risk of violating privacy expectations that are not explicitly waived. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly requesting sensitive personal information without providing a clear justification or seeking consent, relying solely on the officer's authority. This fails to uphold the principle of transparency and can be perceived as an unwarranted intrusion, potentially eroding public trust and creating legal challenges related to privacy rights, even if not explicitly prohibited by a specific statute in this context. Another incorrect approach is to broadly collect information from individuals who are not directly involved in an investigation under the guise of general community safety awareness. This constitutes overreach and a potential violation of privacy expectations, as individuals have a right to privacy unless there is a specific, articulable reason for an inquiry related to a lawful investigation or public safety concern. Such broad collection can be seen as a fishing expedition. A third incorrect approach is to imply or state that providing the requested information is mandatory when it is not, or when there is no legal basis for such a mandate. This misrepresentation of authority is unethical and can lead to individuals providing information under duress, which may render that information inadmissible and damage the officer's credibility and the department's reputation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific context of the interaction. This includes assessing the immediate situation, identifying the objective of the interaction, and considering the relevant departmental policies and North Carolina legal principles. The next step is to determine the least intrusive method to achieve the objective, prioritizing voluntary cooperation and transparency. If consent is sought, it must be informed and freely given. If information is collected without explicit consent, it must be based on a clear legal justification and be directly relevant to a lawful purpose. Continuous self-assessment of actions against ethical guidelines and legal standards is crucial. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a Greensboro Police Department officer, responding to a developing situation involving a potential public safety threat, is approached by a local news reporter seeking immediate information. The officer has some preliminary, unconfirmed details about the incident. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take in accordance with Greensboro Police Department guidelines? Option A. Immediately share the unconfirmed details with the reporter to ensure the public is informed as quickly as possible. Option B. Confirm the accuracy of the preliminary details with a supervisor and await authorization before providing any information to the reporter, adhering strictly to the department's media relations policy. Option C. Post the preliminary, unverified observations directly to a personal or departmental social media account for public awareness. Option D. Offer a vague, non-committal statement to the reporter and privately hint that they should continue to monitor the situation. The correct answer is B. Confirm the accuracy of the preliminary details with a supervisor and await authorization before providing any information to the reporter, adhering strictly to the department's media relations policy. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between departmental policy, the need for timely information dissemination, and the potential for compromising an ongoing investigation. Officers must exercise careful judgment to balance these competing interests. The best approach involves a structured, policy-driven method of information release. This entails confirming the information's accuracy and relevance, obtaining necessary supervisory approval, and adhering strictly to the Greensboro Police Department's established media relations policy. This policy is designed to ensure that information released to the public is factual, does not jeopardize investigations, and is communicated through authorized channels. By following this protocol, officers uphold their duty to inform the public while safeguarding the integrity of law enforcement operations and maintaining public trust. This aligns with ethical principles of transparency, accountability, and responsible information management. Releasing unconfirmed details to a reporter without supervisory review is professionally unacceptable. This action bypasses established departmental procedures, risking the dissemination of inaccurate information that could mislead the public or create unnecessary alarm. It also violates the principle of authorized communication, potentially undermining the department's official media spokesperson and creating confusion. Sharing preliminary, unverified observations directly with the public via social media before official channels have been utilized is also professionally unacceptable. This approach circumvents departmental policy for controlled information release, lacks the necessary verification and context, and could inadvertently tip off suspects or compromise evidence. It demonstrates a failure to adhere to established protocols for public communication and investigative integrity. Providing a vague, non-committal response to the reporter while privately suggesting they keep an eye on the situation is professionally inadequate. While it avoids outright misinformation, it is evasive and does not fulfill the department's responsibility to provide accurate, albeit limited, information when appropriate. It also creates an informal channel of communication that is not subject to oversight and could lead to misinterpretation or speculation by the reporter. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to departmental policy and ethical guidelines. This involves 1. Identifying the core issue and potential conflicts. 2. Consulting relevant policies and procedures. 3. Seeking supervisory guidance when uncertainty exists or when policy dictates. 4. Prioritizing accuracy, integrity, and the protection of ongoing investigations. 5. Communicating through authorized channels. Question 17. Market research demonstrates that advanced data analytics can significantly enhance crime prediction and prevention efforts. If the Greensboro Police Department is considering implementing a new system to aggregate and analyze public data streams to identify potential criminal patterns, what is the most professionally responsible and legally compliant initial step? Option A. Immediately begin acquiring and analyzing all available public data streams, assuming that the broad benefits to public safety outweigh potential privacy concerns, and address legalities only if issues arise. Option B. Focus on acquiring the largest possible datasets from various sources to maximize the potential for identifying criminal activity, without a primary focus on the specific legal or policy implications of each data stream. Option C. Proceed with data analysis using anonymization techniques, believing that this process inherently satisfies all privacy requirements without the need for explicit legal review. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable North Carolina statutes and Greensboro Police Department policies related to data privacy, data collection, and the use of analytical technologies, consulting with legal counsel to ensure full compliance before any data is acquired or analyzed. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable North Carolina statutes and Greensboro Police Department policies related to data privacy, data collection, and the use of analytical technologies, consulting with legal counsel to ensure full compliance before any data is acquired or analyzed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a department's need for information to maintain public safety and the privacy rights of individuals. The Greensboro Police Department must navigate the complex legal landscape of North Carolina, specifically concerning the collection and use of data that could potentially identify individuals, even if anonymized. The challenge lies in balancing proactive crime prevention strategies with strict adherence to privacy laws and departmental policy, ensuring that any data collection is both lawful and ethically sound. The potential for misuse or misinterpretation of data, even when collected with good intentions, necessitates a rigorous and principled approach. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of North Carolina's statutes governing data collection and privacy, alongside the Greensboro Police Department's internal policies. This approach prioritizes understanding the legal boundaries and departmental guidelines before implementing any new data analysis techniques. Specifically, it requires consulting with the department's legal counsel to ensure compliance with relevant laws such as the North Carolina Public Records Act and any specific regulations pertaining to the use of surveillance or data aggregation technologies. This proactive legal and policy review ensures that any data analysis is conducted within the established legal framework, respecting individual privacy rights while achieving legitimate law enforcement objectives. This aligns with the ethical imperative to act lawfully and responsibly. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the data analysis based solely on the perceived benefit of crime prevention, without first verifying legal permissibility. This disregards the fundamental principle that law enforcement actions must be grounded in legal authority and respect for individual rights. Failure to consult legal counsel or review departmental policy could lead to violations of privacy laws, resulting in legal challenges, reputational damage, and the suppression of evidence. Another incorrect approach is to assume that anonymizing data automatically negates all privacy concerns. While anonymization is a crucial step, it is not always foolproof. Sophisticated re-identification techniques can sometimes compromise anonymized datasets. Therefore, relying solely on anonymization without considering the potential for re-identification and without a clear legal basis for the collection and analysis of even anonymized data is professionally unsound and potentially illegal. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize the acquisition of the most comprehensive data possible, regardless of its direct relevance to specific ongoing investigations. This data hoarding mentality can lead to the collection of excessive personal information, increasing the risk of breaches and violating the principle of data minimization, which is often implicitly or explicitly part of privacy regulations. It also raises questions about the proportionality of data collection to the stated law enforcement goals. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, clearly define the objective of the data analysis and its intended use. Second, identify all relevant legal statutes and departmental policies governing data collection, privacy, and use within North Carolina. Third, consult with legal counsel to interpret these regulations and assess the legality of the proposed data analysis. Fourth, develop a clear, documented plan that outlines the data sources, collection methods, anonymization techniques, security measures, and retention policies, ensuring strict adherence to legal and ethical standards. Finally, Regularly review and update these practices in light of evolving legal requirements and technological advancements. Question 18. The efficiency study reveals that certain patrol units in the Greensboro Police Department are consistently underutilized, while response times in other high-crime areas are increasing. Considering the department's commitment to data-driven policing and community safety, which of the following actions represents the most responsible and effective use of departmental resources? Option A. Disregard the study's findings, citing potential disruption to established patrol routines and the need to maintain current staffing levels in all units to ensure perceived departmental presence. Option B. Implement minor adjustments to shift start times across all units to create a perception of increased activity, without altering the actual distribution of patrol resources or response strategies. Option C. Immediately reassign officers from underutilized units to areas with higher reported crime, without further analysis of the study's specific recommendations or potential impacts on existing unit effectiveness. Option D. Conduct a detailed analysis of the study's findings, correlating them with current crime data and community needs assessments to propose targeted adjustments in patrol routes and specialized unit deployment, followed by a pilot program and subsequent evaluation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed analysis of the study's findings, correlating them with current crime data and community needs assessments to propose targeted adjustments in patrol routes and specialized unit deployment, followed by a pilot program and subsequent evaluation. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a critical juncture in resource allocation for the Greensboro Police Department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term strategic goals, all while adhering to strict budgetary constraints and departmental policies. The decision-maker must navigate potential public perception, officer morale, and the effectiveness of different policing strategies. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any reallocation of resources demonstrably enhances public safety and departmental efficiency without compromising core functions or violating established protocols. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of the efficiency study's findings, cross-referencing them with current crime statistics, community feedback, and the department's strategic objectives. This approach prioritizes data-driven decision-making and ensures that any proposed changes are aligned with the department's mission and the needs of the Greensboro community. Specifically, it mandates a thorough analysis of how proposed shifts in patrol routes or specialized unit deployment would impact response times, crime deterrence, and community engagement in different precincts. This aligns with the Greensboro Police Department's commitment to evidence-based policing and community-oriented strategies, as outlined in its operational guidelines, which emphasize the need for measurable outcomes and public accountability. An approach that immediately reallocates resources based solely on the study's initial recommendations without further validation is professionally unacceptable. This fails to account for potential unforeseen consequences or the nuances of specific neighborhood dynamics, potentially leading to decreased effectiveness in certain areas or increased strain on existing resources. It also bypasses the necessary stakeholder consultation and impact assessment required by departmental policy, which mandates a phased implementation and review process for significant operational changes. Another unacceptable approach is to dismiss the study's findings outright due to resistance from certain units or officers. While officer input is valuable, decisions regarding resource allocation must be based on objective analysis and departmental priorities, not solely on the comfort or preferences of individual personnel. Ignoring data-driven insights in favor of maintaining the status quo represents a failure to adapt and improve, potentially hindering the department's ability to serve the Greensboro community effectively. This contradicts the department's stated commitment to continuous improvement and professional development. Finally, an approach that focuses on superficial changes, such as minor adjustments to shift schedules, without altering patrol patterns or resource distribution, is also professionally deficient. This fails to address the core inefficiencies identified in the study and represents a missed opportunity to implement meaningful improvements. It suggests a lack of commitment to substantive change and may lead to continued suboptimal resource utilization, ultimately impacting the department's overall performance and its ability to meet the evolving needs of Greensboro residents. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve 1. understanding the problem and its context, the efficiency study's findings and their implications. 2. Gathering and analyzing relevant data, crime stats, community feedback, study details. 3. Identifying and evaluating potential solutions, different reallocation strategies. 4. Considering the impact of each solution on various stakeholders, officers, community, department goals. 5. Selecting the most effective and ethical solution, ensuring compliance with all relevant policies and regulations. 6. Planning for implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Question 19. Governance review demonstrates that Greensboro Police Department officers are expected to exercise sound judgment when observing individuals whose behavior might be perceived as unusual. If an officer observes two individuals in a public park at dusk, appearing to look around frequently and speaking in hushed tones, what is the most appropriate course of action according to established Greensboro Police Department protocols and North Carolina law? Option A. Conduct a pat-down search of the individuals and their belongings to ensure they are not carrying any weapons or contraband. Option B. Observe the individuals from a discreet distance, document their actions, and consult with a supervisor or the appropriate investigative unit if suspicious activity is confirmed. Option C. Ignore the individuals as their behavior does not clearly indicate any criminal intent. Option D. Immediately approach the individuals, identify yourself as a police officer, and demand their identification and the reason for their presence. Correct answer is B. Observe the individuals from a discreet distance, document their actions, and consult with a supervisor or the appropriate investigative unit if suspicious activity is confirmed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for swift action in a potential public safety incident and the requirement to adhere to established departmental protocols and legal boundaries. Misjudging the scope of authority or the proper procedure can lead to civil liability, departmental sanctions, and erosion of public trust. Careful judgment is required to balance immediate concerns with long-term legal and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a measured response that prioritizes gathering information and confirming the necessity of intervention before taking direct action. This approach, which involves observing from a distance, documenting activities, and consulting with a supervisor or the appropriate investigative unit if suspicious activity is confirmed, aligns with the Greensboro Police Department's established policies on surveillance, probable cause, and the use of force. Specifically, it respects the Fourth Amendment rights of individuals by avoiding unwarranted intrusion and ensures that any subsequent action is based on articulable facts and reasonable suspicion, or probable cause, as mandated by North Carolina law and departmental general orders. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of wrongful detainment or search and ensures that resources are deployed effectively and legally. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately approaching the individuals and demanding identification based solely on the observation of them looking around. This is problematic because simply looking around is not inherently indicative of criminal activity and does not, in itself, constitute reasonable suspicion under North Carolina law. Such an action could be construed as an unlawful stop or detention, violating the individual's rights and potentially leading to a suppression of any evidence obtained. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the situation entirely, assuming it is not a concern. While it is crucial to avoid overreach, completely disregarding a situation that raises even a mild concern about potential public safety could be a dereliction of duty if further observation revealed concrete evidence of wrongdoing. Departmental guidelines often encourage officers to be observant and report suspicious activity, and a complete lack of engagement might fall short of this expectation. A third incorrect approach is to immediately initiate a search of the individual's belongings without any indication of criminal activity or consent. This is a clear violation of Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, as well as North Carolina statutes governing searches. Without probable cause or a warrant, such an action is illegal and would render any discovered evidence inadmissible in court, while also exposing the officer and the department to significant legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must employ a decision-making framework that begins with situational awareness and threat assessment. This is followed by a thorough understanding of legal boundaries, e.g., reasonable suspicion, probable cause, search and seizure laws in North Carolina, and departmental policies. The next step is to consider the least intrusive means necessary to address the situation, escalating intervention only as warranted by developing facts. Documentation and consultation with supervisors or legal counsel are critical checkpoints throughout the process to ensure accountability and adherence to legal and ethical standards. Question 20. During the evaluation of an officer's biweekly timesheet for the Greensboro Police Department, it was determined that Officer Miller worked a total of 90 hours. Officer Miller's annual salary is $58,240. Assuming a standard 40-hour workweek, what is the correct overtime pay Officer Miller is entitled to for this bi-weekly period, calculated according to North Carolina general statutes and standard departmental practice? Option A. Officer Miller is entitled to $1,056.00 in overtime pay. Option B. Officer Miller is entitled to $1,404.00 in overtime pay. Option C. Officer Miller is entitled to $702.00 in overtime pay. Option D. Officer Miller is entitled to $528.00 in overtime pay. Correct answer is A. Officer Miller is entitled to $1,056.00 in overtime pay. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Greensboro Police Department officer by requiring the accurate calculation of overtime pay based on North Carolina general statutes and departmental policy, while also considering potential discrepancies in recorded hours. The officer must demonstrate meticulous attention to detail and a thorough understanding of relevant pay regulations to ensure fair compensation and maintain departmental financial integrity. Failure to accurately calculate overtime can lead to underpayment or overpayment, both of which have legal and ethical ramifications. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic approach to calculating overtime. This includes 1. Verifying the total hours worked against the standard workweek, typically 40 hours in North Carolina for many public sector employees, unless otherwise specified by statute or collective bargaining agreement. 2. Identifying all approved overtime hours worked beyond the standard workweek. 3. Applying the correct overtime pay rate, which under North Carolina law is generally 1.5 times the regular rate of pay for hours worked in excess of 40 in a workweek. 4. Using the officer's base hourly rate, derived from their annual salary, to perform the calculation. The formula for the base hourly rate is annual salary /2080, assuming a standard 40-hour workweek for 52 weeks. The overtime rate is then calculated as base hourly rate *1. 5. The total overtime pay is the sum of overtime hours * overtime rate. This approach ensures compliance with North Carolina General Statute Section 153A-101, which governs compensation for county employees, and any specific departmental policies regarding overtime authorization and calculation, promoting fairness and fiscal responsibility. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply multiply all hours worked over 40 by the base hourly rate without applying the overtime premium. This fails to adhere to the statutory requirement for time and a half pay for overtime hours, directly violating North Carolina General Statute Section 153A-101 and leading to underpayment. Another incorrect approach would be to use an estimated or rounded hourly rate for the overtime calculation, rather than deriving it precisely from the officer's annual salary. This introduces potential inaccuracies and could result in either under- or overpayment, undermining the principle of accurate compensation and potentially violating departmental financial controls. A further incorrect approach would be to include non-overtime hours in the overtime calculation, or to apply the overtime rate to all hours worked in a week if the total exceeds 40, without distinguishing between regular and overtime hours. This demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of overtime principles and would lead to an incorrect and inflated overtime pay calculation, violating principles of accurate record-keeping and financial management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such calculations with a structured methodology. First, clearly identify the relevant legal framework, North Carolina general statutes, and departmental policies. Second, meticulously gather all necessary data, annual salary, hours worked. Third, break down the calculation into discrete verifiable steps Determine the base hourly rate, identify overtime hours, calculate the overtime rate, and then compute the total overtime pay. Fourth, cross-reference the final calculation against the established parameters to ensure accuracy and compliance. This systematic process minimizes the risk of error and upholds professional integrity.